All right, guys, here we are today with Bryan Shymko, also known as the Ginger Troll. Uh, welcome, buddy. How you doing? Yeah, I bet you have.
Thanks for having me, Bear. It's always nice to be on a Zoom call with you. This is our first our first one, but man, we're hitting it off.
Yeah, just a great time. Shymko, we used to work together at the place that shall not be named before.
Yeah, that place is, yeah, we'll just not talk about that place.
Like Voldemort, you never say the name.
Well, I always like to say, you can shit talk something, but I'm kind of where I am because of that place.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it ever did me dirty, but it did me dirty.
Yeah, no kidding.
So our boy Bryan here has a specialty. It's called FRC, and he's going to talk about that today because a lot of people don't know exactly what it is, but how important it actually is for strength, performance, and development. So, Shymko, why don't you give me a little bit of background on you so people know who you are, and then we can get into the other fun stuff.
You got me a little nervous saying that there's a specialty. So, I'd like to say that there's a specialty, but at the end of the day, the nice thing about this, it's more of a system, and more specifically a system and a way of thinking about whether it's movement and whether it's strength training, whatever it is. It kind of gives you just a good process of thinking. And like I said, people, and that's the neat thing with this thing is I think off the start, they kind of made a little bit of a mistake by kind of, talking about it as a mobility system. But over the last, I think 2, 3, definitely 4 years, it's evolved into a lot more than just a mobility system. And they have, I think, I have nothing to verify this, but I think when they really started to work a little more closely with Westside Barbell, that's where I think the system changed from like a mobility system, like advertising as a mobility system, and more of a joint optimization system. And more specifically, they talk about it as a system of internal training versus a system of external training. And we can talk about that a little more as we get into it. But FRC is a functional range conditioning. And like I said, it's a system of thinking. How do we get a joint to where it is? Whether it's nothing injured, something that functions pretty decently, and where do we get it, and how do we get it to function better, and get it to more performance based as well. So that's especially the last 2, 3 years. That's really where it's gone. It's gone to more of the performance realm. These guys always talk about before they present something, they're working with something 3, 4 years in the making before they actually present it. So they have all the science and all the stuff to kind of back it up. So yeah, it's a functional range conditioning. It's a way of thinking, and it takes something from a very specific assessment process, and it kind of builds you into what they call like a monster, whether it's joint wise, and then you can build that into more of your systems based approach with external training as well. So yeah, I think that's a long-winded answer to what that was.
One of those things that people think they know what they're talking about until they start talking with someone that actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, and then I start talking, I'm like, what the hell was even the question?
How'd you stumble on this one, bud? Where'd you find this stuff? What got you into it?
This one is kind of funny because it was one of those things that you just see online. You see some things. So first of all, the place I was in my career was I was a trainer of maybe 5 years, 6 years. Been working a little bit more under, there's a lot of people I did mentorships with at the place that shall not be named. I'll learn a lot, and that was more of like your traditional strength training, pattern training, external training with Poliquin style, A1B, A1A2, B1 B2 type setup. So there's there, and then I was a manager at that point, and I was getting real stale with my training. Like it got to the point where I'm just getting like, why are we doing these squats? Like there's got to be more to it than just doing your squats or your lunges. Like it get to the point where someone would come in and it was like, oh, my knee's sore, and how you got a lower body day plan, and you're like, oh shit, so I guess we'll just do some upper body today. I speak a lot from just the clientele that I have, which is older population. We're talking 40 plus, and we're talking people that generally have injuries, general population type stuff. So I was dealing with a lot of that stuff and having no answers. You get to the point where it's like, oh, I just do more clamshells, get more hamstring, and I'm just like doing it, but it's not working. So then I'd stumble across this, this online stuff on Instagram, and it was like really slow, really joint focused, odd positions at that time for me, like 90s, stuff like that. And it was just, it's kind of neat. So that was kind of the realm I was looking at wanting to go. So I'm just like, okay, I think that's what I want to do. So I went, signed up for a course and went there, Seattle, I think it was. Beautiful town. Anyways, I've never paid attention to something so intentfully, I guess, in ever. And I did the 7.5 years of school, and I barely paid attention. And then with this one, I did about 8 hours a day, and it was like I couldn't even I just had to wipe my eyes. I just started getting crusties in my eyes. I just kept. So, anyways, it was the stuff that they present is really neat because it's nothing new. It's stuff like, especially if you went to, if you've done kinesiology, you've done, kinetics, human kinetics stuff, you've done a lot of your courses. It's stuff that you've heard of. A number of you've heard of isometrics, you've heard of, tension, strain, you've heard of all this stuff, and then, all the science to back it up, PNF stretching. But nobody has presented it in a systematic approach. So when they start presenting their case, or when they start presenting their system, they have all this science to back it up. I always say that they could be fucking lawyers, because they build this case up and then they start presenting you with the stuff that they present. And then they're like, does anyone have any questions? Does that make sense? And it's like, well, you just gave me all the science behind it. So no, I'm just agreeing with you. So I saw it online. I seeked them out. I kind of just seen where they were in and around Calgary, and I just went and dove headfirst into it. And then outside of that, it was like, what more can I do there? So after the FRC course, I was one of the first classes to the kin stretch. So they started, and they always say that they've started this program, they started this system, but they went like backwards. So they did the FRC, which is the training style of stuff. And then the kin stretch is more of a group class based off of the systematic approach. So it's stuff that you want to do with teams, groups, whereas FRC is more specific and individualized for the individual that you're working with.
Yeah.
And then they built on a functional range assessment, which is essentially the first thing that you do now. So it was like, for me, it was FRC, it was kin stretch. And then it was the second summit where they presented more, what was it? They presented this is where they started to talk about joint optimization, speed and velocity training at end range. And then after that, I did the functional range assessment. So I kind of went ass backwards with them a little bit as well. So, which was kind of interesting. So, and then any other stuff I can seek out, I kind of go. So I'm working with my guy, Roger Menta, who's a chiro and a physio here too as well. Soft tissue guy, I call him. And he's one of the teachers, instructors of the FRC soft tissue side of things. So yeah, anything I can get my hands on FRC related, I'll do it. It's great stuff. So.
That's cool, man. I remember when you came back from that thing in Seattle and you showed me a few things, and I said, damn, you're onto something, man. Keep at it.
Oh, I remember we do some internal rotation. It was like a gunshot to the hip. It's like,
cramps every time we talk about the hamstring.
Yeah. Well, it changed the game, man. It changed the game for my business and what I was doing, and it just changed the way I thought about everything. It was really neat. So.
Yeah, it definitely puts a lot of different it puts into question a lot of the stuff that I do. When I introduced it to my clientele, they're like, what the heck am I talking? What are you talking about? I was like, I can't explain it. You have to see it. Like, you have to do it before you can see it. And it's been pretty interesting to watch them go through it. So it's been pretty cool for that. But you mentioned earlier about internal and external training. Why don't you kind of explain that one a little bit?
Again, like a lot of this stuff that I talk about, I'm not the guy that's done a lot of the research behind it. I'm not the guy that goes seeks this stuff out. I'm a guy that listens to some of the smartest guys talk, and I listen to what they talk about. And if they push me in a direction, I tend to go that direction. So it was Andrew Ospina, the developer of the course, and they talked about, and they really drove home in the second summit of the FRC, and they drove home the internal versus external type training. And I think the big, again, I think the switch, or at least the focus switched a little bit, I think, when they started to work with Westside Barbell. There's a guy, John Quint, who's the soft tissue guy at Westside Barbell. And I think he really tried to explain the difference between internal and external training. So when we talk about internal training, we talk about, controlling yourself before controlling external objects, external people, stuff like that. And to relate with you a little bit more, some of jujitsu stuff that you do, you know, it's like control yourself, control your body before you control somebody else's body. So the internal type training that we essentially do is more tension based and more, you know, they call it, the term is called irradiation, but I like to use the word strain, or, you know, just muscle strain, you know, resistance, that kind of stuff. So if we look at creating more internal strain, it would almost be like flexing a muscle and then working that flexed muscle throughout a full range. So if I'm working with new people, I'll just kind of talk to them about that. But essentially what we try to do is get more of that, that neurological attention, neurological focus, neurological strain into the muscle tissue. And then the more you strain internally, the more you're going to be able to strain externally. I guess the more you're going to be able to control externally. So I don't know how many people you've trained in your day that have done a movement and it looks like a fucking banana peel, and they go down and squat and they just fold down, and like it's like do a press, and like how does somebody do a press without like an active arm? Like how does somebody not have an active bicep tricep during a press? Like how can you do a press without using your fucking elbow? So what you talk about there is the ability to strain tissue, and that's the neat thing with this, is that you don't need a lot of weight to create a lot of strain. So, and then the better you strain, the more control you're going to have through external load. And from my experience, more weight you're going to be able to control as well. So if you can strain more internally, you're going to be able to create more force and move more weight externally. So control yourself before you control external stuff is kind of the simple way of putting it.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool way of looking at it. And I guarantee a lot of people don't look at it that way. Yeah. So who would you say FRC in Kinstretch is for?
Oh, like this is the neat thing. It's like, you know, who is it for? Anyone that wants functioning joints. And with that being said, almost every human being, anyone that almost. Now, the question is, you know, how much do you focus on it? I think is the big question for a lot of people. I'm a firm believer that everybody should be doing it, whether you're, you know, a 6-year-old kid, whether you're a 19-year-old bodybuilder that wants to get jacked, if you're a 75-year-old lady that just wants to move better and be out of pain. I think it's honestly for everybody. The question is how much focus and how much time do you put into it? That's where you see a lot of people starting to really question the system, because when they come in and do a course, they basically say, and in most cases, about 90% of the people that you see don't have a functioning joint. I'll tell you, I don't think there's anyone that I've seen that has every single joint functioning how it should to their best capability. So how much do you focus on it, I guess? And I think I've stumbled across this the last couple of years. I've been working with this system for about, I want to say 5 years, almost 5 years. And I've stumbled more across this working with my guy, Roger. And, you know, how much time do you focus on it? And that's the thing, is how shitty are your joints? So if your joints are really shitty, then you should focus more on, you know, building, focus more on internal training and focus more on building function through your joints. If you got, you know, the best functioning joints ever, and there's no pain, and they move well, and they have all of the range that you need for your, you know, your style of training, your sport, your whatever it is, then you can spend less time on doing this. But either way, it's everybody should be working on it. The worse your joints are, the more you should be focusing on FRC work, and more you should be focusing on building functional joints. The better your joints function, the more you can do your pattern training, and the more you can do your external type training is kind of the way I've thought about it, especially the last couple of years. So to sum it up, your answer, everybody should do it. If your joints are really shitty, you should focus more on it. If your joints are really good, which I don't see often, then you can focus less on it. But in most cases, my training, it happens within about 40 to 50%, 50 to 60% of more internal training is what I focus on. About 40% of my stuff is like pattern training, squats, deadlifts, press. I love my stuff. I love my pattern training. And I think that's where a lot of people get offended, is because you'll look at your joint, your shoulder doesn't rotate, and people want to do the sexy stuff. They want to do the muscle ups. They want to do the fucking dips. They want to do this, but it's like, well, your joint doesn't function, doesn't rotate. So why the fuck are you making it do stuff that it can't do? So
it's not uncommon.
Yeah. Oh, it's It's all too often now in this days. We were just talking about before this thing on the online stuff. You see the sexy shit, the stuff that gets the likes, the stuff that gets the followers, but that's not actually what gets the follower. The boring shit is the shit you should be doing, and that shit doesn't get you followers.
So. I know it's it's
the
sexy
stuff.
Most coaches in my world do 90% of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Squat, bench, dead, pull up, overhead press, swing a kettlebell, lunge, carry something. That's 90% of what I do. Sprint, jump. That's all I really do. And, you know, that doesn't get you much likes or followings. Now, if I throw someone like doing like some kind of crazy kettlebell snatch complex with like muscle ups and like,
it's handstand stuff, man. Yeah. Handstands.
Yeah.
You got to get a thong on, thong pictures.
That's what we need, more thong pics of me and you right there.
Oh man, I don't know. People will be unfollowing me. I'll end up with like 2 followers.
How do you get negative followers?
I don't know.
Instagram kind of actually shuts down. It's like, nope.
Yeah. Fucking Instagram would have shut me down. He likes you.
What kind of benefits have you noticed with your clientele that are doing the FRC stuff?
So I'm going to look at this from a few different directions. Like for me specifically, the results and the outcomes are kind of ridiculous. So for me, when I started, I didn't have much function in my joints. So when we talk about function, we talk about what is the primary function of your joints. Now, in every single joint except for your spine, the primary function is rotation, is the ability for your joints to rotate. So for me, I kept getting, the odd hip flexor twinge, the odd shoulder flare up, the odd, it wasn't the odd one, but my Achilles tendon rupture. I'll get the odd one of these and you wonder, like, why the fuck am I getting injured? Like I move when you compare me to other people, I move okay. But then when you do a really deep assessment of the joints, it's like my shit doesn't rotate. My hips don't rotate. I have no internal rotation of my hip. My shoulders don't rotate. There's no internal rotation there. So yeah, no wonder you're getting injured doing squats and doing pressing and doing dips. You're making your joints do something that they physically can't do. Not only are you doing that, you're doing it and you're forcing them to do it under load. So that's the one thing. So for me, I've gotten myself out of those odd little injuries, nicks and stuff like that. And just the style and the way my training has been going, it's helped improve everything. I like my gymnastics based work, I like my ring stuff. I like my patterns, but now you can go through a workout without feeling like you're going to feel that in the joints next day. The next day you wake up and you actually feel it in the tissue that you're trying to work. So for me, specific benefits, it's hard to even quantify. Now, for me, a lot of the clients I work with, they always end up with some level of, they always come to me with some level of pain, some level of whatever. Now, I'm not a guy that knows absolutely everything, so I got a good team of people that I work with. So having a good plan of attack, I think is probably one of the things that's really taught me. But most of my clients, they come out with same thing me, shitty joints that don't rotate, and these odd little aches and pains that they just want to move well without pain. So, like I said, with the style, with the type of people that I work with, we're not talking about, my 67-year-old clients, doing handstands and doing muscle ups, but we're talking them, giving them the ability to work on the garden without feeling their back the next day. We're talking about, being able to essentially move your spine and have control over your spine. So when you're picking shit up, you know where your spine is and you're not ripping your back. Or not even that, it's the stuff that you don't even think about, the ability for your clients to do stuff on their own. So, I've taught, much like myself, I've taught the system to my clients so that when they come in with a little ache and pain, they don't have to come and see me right away. They can work through some stuff on their own and then they can come see me. And fuck, by the time that they're maybe seeing me, they're just like, yeah, I had something on my shoulder. I did some sleeper stretch, did some cars, and that's not there anymore. Or better yet, if it's still there, they got a better assessment. It's like, okay, when I do my cars, I get oh shit, look at that, man. You get me nervous. Look at that. Wow. So they'll come in. Shit.
Hell, he get out of the kitchen, Shymko.
The water. I just spilled the water on my so, so, so they'll come in with a better assessment, right? And then, so they'll say, I got a closing angle pinch here, or I got, some pain here, and I got this and that. And then, if it's out of my scope, which it generally is when somebody comes to me with pain, I'll send them to my soft tissue guy, and we can get a better plan of attack and more specificity in regards to what we're doing. Because this is a whole other topic, but working with soft tissue people that, people that go see somebody and it's like, yeah, your glutes are tight, your hips are tight. I'm like, yeah, anyway, so so you work at you get a proper assessment, come in with some specificity, and with that approach, you end up getting some good results. So yeah, you name it, whether it's better control, whether it's less pain, better pain management, better injury management, better awareness over their body. It can go into other stuff like more energy, and I find that when you get people that end up getting out of pain, you see that motivation switch to their pattern type training, and they're all of a sudden into the gym more. They're not in pain. They get better results just in general. So
yeah. Now you mentioned earlier, like it's a system. Like, can you explain that system and what it looks like?
Oh, yeah, I can. It'd be nice to have a little piece of paper so I could show you, but I don't have one on me. But the systematic approach comes with a high quality assessment. So you obviously do your initial consultation process with their goals, injury, background, pain history, all that kind of stuff. But in regards to what we're trying to assess, it comes with a high quality assessment. And with the high quality assessment, it's basically it basically guides you. So it's like assessment. It's like, okay, what do we look at? Do the joints function? Do they not function? Joints function, go here. Joints don't function, go there. So when people say, oh, you're like, and I don't get this often, but people will tell me that I'm smart. And I'm like, look, I'm not smart. I'm just doing what the system tells me to do. The system tells me that your joint is here and that we should be doing this. Now, the neat thing is that we might have each joint at a different level and a different spot within that system. So you might have a joint that just doesn't function at all. So you might have a hip that's absolute dog shit, and it's sitting into an area that you might just need soft tissue. And then you might have a shoulder that's, ready to roll. That's maybe even getting into the optimization. You might have a shoulder that's ready for some speed and velocity training, but you might have a hip that's just not even getting out of the soft tissue side of things. So you got each joint at different levels and different ideas on the system. And the goal is to eventually get every single one of your joints down to the optimization side of things, where you can use external load, where you can look at speed and velocity, where you can get into that other stuff. So it kind of gives you a good flow in regards to what to do. So for me, I'm not a soft tissue guy. So if I have somebody that doesn't, that might have a closing angle pinch, that might have pain that I don't know what I'm doing, then I push them off to a soft tissue guy. And then soft tissue works on that side of things and then sends them back to me. And then I'll work on specificity. Obviously, I'll get a diagnosis. And that's one thing. You work with a soft tissue person, you should get some level of diagnostic work by the time you're done. If you get a soft tissue person working with you and you don't know what they're working on, or they don't know what they're working on, then that's a situation to maybe have another set of eyes have a look. Because when you're looking at getting tissue treatment on an injury, it needs to be specific 100% of the time.
Okay.
Or you're just treating random stuff, right? Like, what are you treating if you don't know what you're treating, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's the same thing as I tell people, like, there's two types of training. There's working out and there's actually training.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference.
Or exercise and training. There's a difference between exercising and training.
Yeah, 100%. And
who was it that said that? I think it was,
I don't know.
I forget who it was, but yeah, one of the FRC guys was talking about that. And it's like, training is intentful. It's results focused. It's specific to the individual. It's progressive overload. It's all of these things. And then you got the exercise that, oh, perfect. I got this cool workout off of, Mobility Water. I got a cool workout off of, CrossFit.com. And let's do that. It's like, for what?
And that's why I keep telling people, like, and I've had clients that, like, when we switched from the old place, they worked out. They thought they trained, but they worked out. And we went to the new place. We went to the Trek. And I walked in on day one. I looked at them all and said, I know you guys were like probably the top 20% of the gym. I was like, just so everyone knows, we're in the bottom 20% over here. And they laughed. Like 90% of my clients, I was like, yeah, sure. And they walked in and they're like, holy shit, we are
Yeah, there's
not.
guys that work hard.
Yeah, and it was a completely different environment. And they were like,
Yeah.
and then after like a month, like we didn't even train over there. I was like, no, man, like you didn't.
No,
And
I
now
love it
the difference between training and working out, and that intent of effort is so much better just in
yeah.
the environment, because they're coming in like they don't miss sessions. They do miss sessions. It's like, man, my car blew up and my wife's been kidnapped and I got to pull a Liam taking shit, and this is how it's going to go down.
I got COVID-19, man. I got COVID-19. I can't come.
Yeah. So it's definitely like been interesting to just see people's mind shift switch from working out to training, and
Yeah.
the result they get from that. Because when you work out, there's always nothing to do. Like it's always a reason to skip a workout. Pizza night, cake night. I don't care.
Easy stuff, man. That's easy.
Yeah.
Missing workouts. The hard thing is getting the results, or getting the, who was it? I think it was Cressy that had a good post. Was it yesterday or the day before? And it was basically like, you know, you're going to have some shitty workouts. You're going to have some workouts at midnight. You're going to have some early morning workouts. They're not all going to be great, but the thing is, just get it in.
Yeah. It's consistency over time.
Yep.
Like that's what I keep telling people. Like you're not, like I've had so many people come in like, yeah, I want to squat like 600 pounds. I'm like, what do you squat now? They're like 135. It's like, we've got 3 years of work to do. And they're like, well, this other coach said they can do it in a year. I was like, then go do a couple cycles of steroids and go do it. I'm not, if that's what you want to do in a year, and I'll rehab you on year and 18 months or whatever the heck it is. Cause that's when you're blown out, your back's gonna be shot, your shoulder's gonna be toast. Like
that was the good and the bad thing of working at that other place, is that, you know, you'd have trainers, you know, doing shit that they shouldn't be doing with their clients. They'd get them injured, and then they just end up working with me a little bit, and then they'd then sit back, get them injured, come work with me a little bit more. Perfect. And then it gets to the point where I start educating them, and they're like, maybe I shouldn't be doing that stuff. And I'm like, hey, that's up to you to make that decision, but it's up, I don't know. Like you're starting to understand now. You're starting to understand.
I can't begin to tell you how many people I had to rehab from other coaches, and it was just like, I'm not even that good at this. I just know that you shouldn't be squatting. Why? Because your knee is the size of a cantaloupe walking up the stairs, and not a watermelon putting a barbell on your back. Like you should not be doing this.
It's like what? And that's the other question. I think the big one, I think for everyone, you know, I don't care what, you know, what industry you're in, but, you know, what are we trying to do with people? Like if you had somebody from ground up, like what are we trying to do and what are we trying to build? And that's where I think the focus with these FRC guys really kind of helped me get it down to a certain point. Like what are we trying to do with people? So for me specifically, I know you got some different focus with some of your clients, you like with some external type training, but you know, for me, it's like, what are we trying to build? For me, I'm trying to build a fucking monster of a joint with somebody. So I'm trying to make their shoulder like bulletproof, so that if they want to do whatever they want to do with the shoulder, that they have the ability to do that. Like, so yeah, I'm trying to build a fucking monster of a joint. That's kind of funny saying that, because I'm in just go, oh yeah. No, not that way. I'm not building a joint that way. No.
Yeah. Yeah. And I since I've started doing like a lot, I've incorporated more into my training as well. Like just because like when I did my shift, like I focused on powerlifting for probably to some extent for 3 straight years, and I've been lifting 20 some odd years at this point. And I know that my ultimate goal is to do a meet when I'm 80. So it's different when like, it's hard to explain to people that just start lifting or like fairly young, like how to explain this to them. I was like, guys, when you realize that your meet isn't like next month or 6 months from now or a year from now, you stop worrying about the numbers and you start focusing on how do I get there the most efficient and effective way possible without crippling myself in the process. And that you start looking at the meet when you're 80 versus the meet when you're 25.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point, because I think at the end of the day, you know, being a human being, I think trumps anything that people are trying to do. And I agree again with the FRC guys. They'll present this idea is that being a human being, I think trumps everything, because that's who we're dealing with. Like we are animals and we are dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
You know, we're not dealing with cats and dogs, and we're not training cats and dogs to be more like a cat and a dog. We're training human beings. So I think training a human being to become and be more and be a better human being, I think should be at the forefront of a lot of people's training. Because like you said, at the end of the day, when that next meet isn't there and you're just left with your fucking broken body, you know, 50 years old being like, I guess I'm done lifting. Now what? It's like, because for me, you know, that meet, that, you know, that PR, that's a one-time, one-shot deal. But, you know, when I'm thinking 20 years, 30 years down the road, like let's make sure that you have a functioning hip, and we'll still lift, but I still, that function of the hip is going to be and stay at the primary of my focus. Whereas maybe the lifting and the weight might be the primary of your focus of the client, the individual. So for me, it's like when you're done all your shit and you're done breaking your body, like what body are you left with? Because how many people have you seen at the gym, especially at the other gym, with the guy with the towel wrapped around his shoulder who's like, man, back when I didn't have, you know, 2 fucking tears in my rotator cuff, oh man, I could bench 500 pounds. And you're like,
really thinking of the same person, aren't we?
what can your shoulder do now? Because it looks like you can't even lift your hand up over your fucking head. So yeah. I don't care what you could do 20 years ago. What can you do for me now?
Yeah, Matt Wenning, when I went to work with him, put it in such a cool perspective, because everyone thinks I went to work with Matt Wenning because he could squat like 1,200 pounds and bench like 850 and pull like 800. Don't get me wrong. Awesome reason to go hang out with the guy. Learned a ton of shit. But the reason why I went to him is he managed to do all that being pretty much injury-free for 20 some odd years of lifting at a super high level. Yeah. So, I mean, he was onto something. And the thing that he clued me into the most was 2 things. One, he said, dude, when you're done powerlifting or you're done your sport, no one knows who the fuck you are. I mean, if you look at it this way, Bill Kazmaier was arguably one of the strongest and scariest humans to ever fucking live. But he lived in obscurity for nearly 30 years. Yeah. Like, he finished his athletic career being a 3-time world strongest man, a 2-time world powerlifting champion, and done. No one heard after him for like 85. And then all of a sudden, you saw him at the Arnold Classic doing the strongman stuff. But for almost 20 years, he didn't exist. And that dude is still an animal.
He's huge. I saw a video of him the other day, and it was like, you guys
he's still 300 pounds. But what you have to understand is, like, no one knows who the fuck he is. And unless you're like Matt or Eddie Cohn or constantly on social media and marketing yourself, no one's going to talk about, like, you know, whatever you did 20 years ago, because there's someone else doing the same thing or doing better. What body are you left with is the main thing you have to understand. If you can do that kind of lifting and then be a functioning human at the end of that shit, people are going to talk about that like that. Like, people are going to talk about Matt Wenning for a while because he managed to do that shit. Now he's teaching other people how to do that shit.
Yeah, and he's going to be around for a lot longer. Look at a guy like fucking Ronnie Coleman.
That's sad, man. That guy was an absolute freak of nature. Say what you want about how much drugs he did. You still got to be an animal to front squat 600 pounds for multiple reps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think you touched on it a little bit there. And I don't care who you are and what sport you play, to reach the highest level of that sport or whatever, it takes you to be injury-free. Like, you look at a guy like Wayne Gretzky, and I would say like Wayne Gretzky, a guy like LeBron James, it's like, how many major injuries did those 2 guys that you can think of, how many major injuries did they get?
Michael Jordan.
They're the best at what they do because they've been around for a while, and they still would, like, LeBron will be playing for another fucking 5-10 years if he wants. Like
Tom Brady, man.
Look at a guy like Tom Brady, man. Like, so if you're going to be the best at what you do, you have to stay injury-free. Or I wouldn't say injury-free. Like, you got to be able to mitigate the amount of injuries or the severity of the injuries that you get. So, you know, you see a guy, you know, who off the top of my head, I always think about that guy, Robert Griffin III, the quarterback, the Washington Redskins.
RG3, man. I watched that play and I knew he was going to blow something.
Brutal, man. He was the guy who had the whole career ahead of him. I think it was his 1st or 2nd year. And major knee injury, and
down.
Never been the same ever since. So,
but he already had a knee surgery in university. That was the crazy thing. Like, there was no need for that kid to be on the field with that play. I can still say it, and I mean it. But that's what matters. The guy that trains the longest gets the strongest. And you train the longest by not being crippled.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, it's not to say that you're never going to, you know, you work with the system, you build some monster joints, you're never going to get injured. But it's one of those things that you want to make sure that your joints are as resilient as possible, so that they can handle the demand that you're going to give them, whether it's, you know, football, whether it's rugby, whether it's hockey. You want to build those joints as possible.
Yeah. So it's the long-term approach. And now I'm working with a lot more, like, say, tactical athletes, like military, police, paramedic, some fire. And I'm looking at the guys and like, yeah, well, I can squat like 500 pounds. Like, dude, not to be a dick. I said, you can squat 500 pounds, but your ankle and knee don't function. And how often, when you're trying to run someone down, do they care about how much you squat?
Yeah.
You've just been sitting in a car for 3 hours. Now you're busting into a sprint and your back goes. Like, dude, like no one cares how much you squat. They care about you chasing the dude down, controlling him, and then getting back to your partner injury free.
Yeah. That's the other question is, how much do you need to fucking squat? Like, you know, if you're a hockey player, or if you're a football player, like how much do you really need to fucking squat? How strong do you need to be? Because again, I always think about a guy like maybe McDavid, or even like let's bring it back to Gretzky. Like how much Gretzky squat?
Like, he did.
I don't even think he fucking squatted, but like how much does McDavid squat? And like these guys aren't pulling out 500, 600 pound squats. And they bring an interesting point to the table, because I remember I was listening to a podcast with Spina, and he was saying that, you know, if squatting, you know, massive amounts of weight was going to make you a better hockey player, then you'd see hockey scouts in the gym scouting out guys who could squat ridiculous amounts of fucking weight. They'd be like, fuck, that guy can squat a ton of weight. He might not know how to play hockey, but we got to get that guy and get him playing hockey, because that's a direct relationship. It isn't. Right. So it's.
No, I think like I tell people there's like 3 kinds of training, and it really, like, say for the dynos, when I was training them, like I said, guys, you have your in the gym training, and that's barbells, dumbbells, and the stuff that like trains loads and forces and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I said, that's awesome. I said, then you have the on the field training, and I said that stuff's where you practice your skill, your conditioning, and your plays. I said that makes sense. I said, but then there's this little weird shit in the middle. I said, the stuff in the middle is the translating and the gray area between the two. So the reason why we trained the way we did with the dynos is that we would do 2 sessions a week in the gym. They'd have 2 or 3 sessions on the field. But we did one session a week where it was modified strongman training. And we were picking up stones, pushing sleds, flipping tires, sledgehammers, pull-ups, sprints, jumping, all that stuff. And I was like, this is that weird shit that's in the middle. You're doing things at awkward angles in different positions.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what your field training is. You can practice the perfect tackle 1,000 times, but it means you're probably never going to use it in the field, like in a game, maybe once or twice. I said, but if you know how to pick up a stone, put it on your shoulder, then sprint. I said, this shit translates to sport.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Let's talk more about that too, because that's like, I think what you're talking about is variability.
Yeah.
We want training variability. We want you know, if all we do is work with a barbell, the law of specificity would tell us that you'll get good with working with a barbell, but how often is the barbell on the field? So creating more variability. And then these guys always talk about it more from a joint level perspective in terms of variability. Like let's say your shoulder has all of the movements it requires. It has a sufficient amount of internal rotation, tons of external rotation, good flexion, extension. It's got you got a hell of a shoulder. The ability for that joint and that shoulder to be able to achieve a skill is going to be greater, because you have more variability, more movement options available with that shoulder. So what I say is more room for error. So if you're trying to teach that shoulder a new skill, whether it's, you know, you want to say pressing, or you want to say throwing, or whatever it is, that shoulder needs a certain, that shoulder requires a certain amount of prerequisites to achieve what you're trying to get it to do. Now, the nervous system is really neat, because if you give the nervous system a task, and you'll see this often, is that you give it a task, it's going to achieve that task, whether it's the right way or the wrong way. Your nervous system doesn't know what the right way is, whatever the fuck that means. Like, I was like, the posture.
It knows what it knows.
Who the fuck is the guy that wrote the book on posture? Who's the guy's like, fuck, I know everything about posture. It's like, who the fuck wrote that book? I don't even know.
You read a book on posture about me and you? and you?
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is variability, and the more variability a joint has, or I think the way you're talking about too, whether it's a movement variability, is the better you're going to be able to achieve a task, or better you're going to be able to achieve a skill. So yeah, having that variability within the joint gives you a little more room for error, but it allows you to adapt to different stimulus as well.
Yeah, and that's why, like, unless you are, say, in a sport like powerlifting or Olympic lifting, where you're only doing 2 or 3 movements, and you're trying to get super, super good at 2 or 3 movements, you need to have the ability to squat, bench, and dead, do cleans and snatches and jerks and all that stuff. But then you also have the ability to do, say, a clean and jerk with a kettlebell,
Sure.
or a clean and jerk with a dumbbell, or do, say, a clean with a stone. Like, you have to have the ability to put different loads and forces into those joints in similar movement patterns, but because the variability is there, it doesn't beat you up as much. And that's what I went to learn with Matt, the conjugate method. And that shit for long term, if you want to be training long term and focusing primarily on three main movements, like squat, bench, and dead.
Yeah.
That shit long term is where you want to be, in my opinion, because it just allows the body to take a beating. I trained conjugate for about close to 18 months.
Yep.
And I could tell you on probably one hand how many training sessions I missed in 6 days a week training. But you give me a straight bar with straight weight, I'd get 4 days a week, and then I'd taken 3 days off. My joints just couldn't take it.
Yeah. No, I agree with. I like the conjugate method. That's what a lot of these again the FRC guys have gotten working a little bit.
Athletic development, I think it's bang on for long-term powerlifting.
Absolutely. No, it's under the assumption that that you should be training a ton of variability. The more, I guess, the more training age and the higher training age you are, the more variability you need. Because again, if you keep stressing the same lines of tissue and the same movements over and over and over again,
it catches up.
You're gonna get injured. And that's the cool thing. Again, what they present with the FRC is they present and they don't present it, it's already there, but the law of thermodynamics. It's just a law of physiology, I guess physics. It's a physics law. So basically there's entropy, that things are slowly getting into a state of chaos, things are slowly deteriorating. So that's the cool thing that we talk about with deadlifting, is that if you deadlift the same movement, same variable, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the same deadlift, say a sumo deadlift, train that over and over and over again. In theory, if you keep training that, you should be getting stronger. But why don't we have people doing 15,000, 20,000 pound deadlifts? Is because the line of tissue that you keep training can only adapt to a certain extent. Outside of that, if you keep stressing that line of tissue, there's going to be, because of entropy and because things are slowly deteriorating and your weights are slowly going up, there's going to be this cross point where, your joints are to a point where the load, or I guess the load bearing capacity of your joint is no longer there, and the load's too great. So that's where the injury tends to happen. So, yeah.
I think that's super important for like people to understand. Like, I think that variability is incredible, but I think when you start out, say you're learning how to powerlift, I think you have to just practice the movement. Just have to understand what a foundational squat, bench, and dead feels like, and what it is functioning for you, and really hone on that technique. And then you have to start adding the variability.
Yeah.
I tried to do it the way Matt did it. And he's just a super advanced level lifter. He's been literally doing that for 30 fucking years. He's been like a pro. He's been at the top, literally all-time world record holders of squatting and benching. So I mean, he's going to be so in tune with that movement pattern that it'd be like breathing to him. So for me, I had a decent movement pattern, but I had to correct a lot of my shit. Then I did it. But I think if you go too far conjugate and you're not at that level, I think you'll deteriorate your actual main lift.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like,
again,
you have a couple people that are new to training. Stick with the basics and hammer out the basics and get good at the basics and build a solid foundation. But as you get more and more into your training, like we're talking guys here that are trying to get their 600-pound deadlift to like an 800-pound deadlift. Like that's, those are people I do not deal with. I don't deal with people. Fucking, first of all, that weight's too heavy. I don't want to load that fucking bar. That's too much weight for me to load that bar. But these guys
take off.
They're deadlifting 600, 700, 800 pounds. They're not coming to see me. They're coming to see somebody like Matt Wenning. They're going to be going after those guys. But, at the end of the day, if you're to that point, then yes, you need like a guy like Wenning's probably doing a different variation every single week. And he's probably rotating his exercises. I don't know, maybe every 3 months, maybe. Like he probably will do the same exercise for maybe until another 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, we talked about it, and he said he might do the same bench, for example, every 6 months.
Yeah. So he might do a full rep straight bar bench for max effort. He might do that January, and the next time he does that is going to be like June or July.
It won't even be then
Yeah.
at that
So,
point.
but somebody who's just starting out and somebody who's brand new to lifting, then I would say go after that. You could probably train that twice a week if you wanted.
Yeah. And you can get away with a lot of that stuff at the beginning. Like if your training age is say like I say sub 4 years in my opinion, you can pretty much hang out with straight bar, straight weight. But after you get 4 or 5 years and you start to get, and you get, and I'm talking about like people that have been coached and like learn the technique properly and not like I started a gym and I watched a couple of YouTube videos with my buddies and my
Right.
gym bros, and we started like cracking weight out and seeing what happens. Like I'm not talking about that folded spine squat and deadlift. I'm talking about proper technique. About 3 or 4 years of that, that's when you have to start getting creative where you start like, maybe you start with variability, like it could be like dead stop squats or
Yeah.
like pause squatting or something like that. Or maybe you're just like, maybe I'm switching my bar to a safety bar or a buffalo bar or like even crazy enough, like a bamboo bar, like something like that.
Yeah.
But like, having that ability, like that foundational ability of your movement, I think is super crucial in those particular sports. And say things like field sports, having like foundational movements. Like I think like there's several foundational movements for field sports that translate but don't translate to powerlifting. Say like, squatting and deadlifting is a hinge. A lunge would be like a hip rotational movement, and then say a step up would be like a hip elevation movement. Then you have vertical pushing and pulling, rotating and carrying and sleds. And I think those are pretty much, you include jumping and sprinting. I think that's athletic development in my
Yeah,
opinion.
you're talking transferability. So
Yeah,
what exercises do you feel transfer the best to your particular sport too, right?
exactly.
Um, the other thing they talk about too in the FRC world is what I really find interesting. Back in the day, it was always, sport specific training. Let's do our sport specific training, and I'll go see your hockey guy to go do sport specific training. And I'm just like, for me, I don't know if that made a lot of sense to me because I didn't have the information at the time, but at the same time, it's just like, okay, so we're gonna get somebody who's pretty damn good at the agility ladder to do more agility ladder and get
Yeah, I know.
better at their sport.
Yeah.
So the concept that Spina brought up was, tissue specific training for sport. Let's take that let's say that demand on the tissue. Let's say we're talking about a pitcher, a baseball pitcher, where there's a huge demand. First of all, there's a huge demand on fucking everything there, but
Yeah.
there's a very large demand on the elbow, the shoulder. So let's build up that tissue, and let's build up the resiliency in the elbow. Let's build up that internal rotation of the shoulder. Let's build up the internal rotation of the hip, and let's build that tissue specific stuff for that particular sport. And once you have resiliency in that particular joint for that particular sport, then there should be, in theory, should be a little bit less risk of injury, mitigation of injury, all that kind of stuff we were talking about earlier. So yeah, so that was the neat thing was, what is the largest demand on the tissue? Let's train that fucking tissue.
Yeah.
There
And
you
that, and
go.
that it's always so funny for me because I've dealt with like say hockey parents for quite a few years, and I always get there's always a set of hockey parents like, oh, he's got to do more footwork drills and
Yeah.
needs more first step quickness. I'm like, the kid's 14.
First step quickness. He needs more. I need to see him run the ladder. He needs to get his squat up more. And you're just like,
Well,
who the
I
fuck are
remember there was a couple parents. Yeah, I
you?
remember there was a couple parents like, yeah, he needs to do more ladder drills for footwork, and I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I didn't want to argue with the parent anymore. I just said the first day of the session, the kid shows, I was like, listen, we're going to do one ladder drill. I said, and we'll probably only do one ladder drill. I said, but I'll make you a better hockey player. You just tell your parents that we do ladder drills all the time, okay? And they were like, yeah, okay. And then they went on there and they absolutely crushed it. And the parents was like, what are you guys doing? And he's like, I'm doing a lot of ladder drills. Like,
A ton of ladder drills. So many ladder, man. We live
so
in
many like first step quick. I was like, dude, you're out of shape. We got to get you more physically fit, and we got to work on your imbalances. You have a weak
God.
post chain, and you don't know how to coordinate your left from your right. So let's work on that, and I bet you'll be a better hockey player.
But isn't that funny when you first started training? Like when you got an athlete, you felt like you had to do all this fucking crazy stuff with this athlete because they're an athlete. But I think at the end of the day, you start to realize is the more and the better of an athlete you are, generally, the less functioning of a human being you are.
Yeah.
The better you are at throwing shit, and the better you are at that, probably the less, fucking other shoulder shit. Like you said, the better you are at a sport, the less, what is it? What am I trying to say? The less of a human being you become.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you got to remember, like genetics plays a large role in this too. Like you could have a guy that's like super fast. So if I found a guy that's super fast, I ain't gonna work on speed. What the fuck would work on speed? Like, I got to make, if he's super fast, but he's like 30 pounds underweight and super weak, if I just make him a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, not too big because I don't want to mess up his running mechanics, but if I put a little meat on him, rebalance him, fix his like strength a little bit, we're good. I'm not going to focus on like 80% of my training on speed. He's already fast.
Well, I think you said it right there because, and you touched on it, I think at the beginning. But I'm not the guy who's going to work on skill. I'm not the skill coach. I'm not the guy who's going to get you a better sprinter. I'm not the guy who's going to coach you on catching a football or throwing a fucking baseball. I'm not the skill coach. So again, with a lot of these FRC guys, it's like, I'll give you a better human being to work with. I'll give you a better functioning human being so that you can better, kind of what we talked about before, is better acquire those skills that you're looking at achieving. So I will give you a better human being, and then the skill coach can get you better at doing your skills. So
that's how it works. Like, you don't need me to show you how to shoot a hockey puck. You don't need me to throw a rugby ball, but I can make you faster because your running mechanics are dog shit, and you don't know how to jump. We'll work on your jumping. We get you that, you're gonna be a better athlete.
Or I can give you some better internal rotation of your shoulders, so you can get better spin on the ball, and you can put less pressure on your fucking elbow, and whatever it is. So I work with a few people that you work with, and my goal is to give you a better human being so that you can get them to lift more weight during their squat and their deadlift and their press.
So we can take them where they have to be on the field and do that kind of stuff with them to make them better athletes, or sorry, to make them better athletes for their sport. We're just making them better humans.
Yeah. So my whole goal is when I have a person in front of me is to give the skill, if they do have a skill coach, is to give a skill coach a better human being to work with.
Yeah.
Here's a better hip that you can acquire better hip skills with, whether it's running, dancing, fucking you name it. We're just trying to give you a better human being, a better functioning joint to work with. So you can acquire skills better.
Well, and if you give them a better human being and a better functioning joint and better overall, they're less likely to be injured, which means you're going to get more work out of them, which means you get to practice more, which means you're going to acquire better skills and be less likely to be injured for the season. And then you're going to probably play your best players, and you're going to play your players that were like mediocre. They're going to be way better. So now everyone levels up without being injured and beat up all the time. And we didn't really do much sports specific training. We just made you better humans.
Well, that's the funny part, because you did that kind of cycle into a good way. Like, they spend more time in the gym, they get better, more skill. Whereas the other way, it's like you don't have a better human being. You get shittier joints, you get injured, and then you go rehab. You don't spend much time. You're spending most of that time rehabbing your joint to where they were before they got the injury. Not better, but before.
To get them back to where they were.
And then it's this cycle of downhill spiral of getting injured, rehabbing, not working out, then injuring, rehab. And that's where we end up with people that have all the talent in the world, but can't develop because they're always fucking injured. And then you got a guy that's the exact opposite of Crosby and LeBron James and Gretzky. It's like you had all the skill, but you just can't stay in your sport because you don't
because you're always broken or always beat up. Like, I've seen so many people get burned out and beat up from their sport because they did too much, or like they kept getting injured in their sport. And it's like, I hate to say, you got to step away for like 6 months to a year so we can fix your stuff, so we can make you a better human, so you can get back to where you were, just to start to train to where you were. And they don't want to do that. And like, if I take 2 months off, I'm going to lose everything. It's like, you're going to take 2 years off and lose everything completely. Like,
getting injured. I don't know what you want from me. It's like, then keep getting injured. If you want to do something and want to train with me, then you're going to do what I recommend based off of the experience and the education that I have. And if you don't trust my education and that kind of stuff, then go fucking do it yourself. Go get your Instagram model to teach you what to do and how to squat and all that stuff, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I always found it funny. Like, I've always found runners the most interesting people to work with, just like doing a lot of running. And I don't know how many times I've had the conversation with a runner. It's like, okay, so what do you want to do? I was like, well, my low back hurts and my knee hurts. And it's like, yeah, okay, so what are your goals? Like, well, I want to run faster. And I was like, well, what have you been doing to run faster? Like, I'm running more. I was like, well, why would you run more if you want to run faster? I'm like, well, I've got to run faster. I was like, then why don't you run faster? And they're like,
more doesn't always equal better or equal more results.
Yeah, I was like, you said, you don't have to run more, you have to run less, but run faster. I'm like, well, no, I got to run faster. I'm like, yeah, so run faster, not more.
There you did it there, Barry. You just showed us the difference between the training and exercise. Look,
I know.
Continue to exercise. just keep doing what you're doing. But if you want training, then you want to be a professional.
The really messed up thing was usually when I got these runners that actually worked with me and wanted to do what I cut the running down to like, there's one girl I cut her running down to like literally less than 25% of her
weekly run. Must have hated you for it. And you know how runners
wanted to kill me until she did her first 10K. And she shaved, I think, 12 minutes off her 10K.
A lot.
On a 10K. Like, that's a significant amount of time.
Yeah, that'd be like, what would that be? Depending on, that'd be a 1/6 of the time you just took away. That's a huge
I think she went from like 72 minutes to like a flat 60.
Yeah.
I'll tell you exactly what we did. We did hips, hamstrings, upper back, and trunk work.
Tissue specific training for sport.
Honestly, we did nothing else. She had a very weak set of hips and super tight. And we started doing lateral work. And all of a sudden she's like, I have a second gear going uphill. I said, second, he's probably a fifth gear. She goes, I'm literally sprinting past people uphill. I'm like, yeah, it's because you have a set of hips.
Well, that's what I gotta, I had a guy that I was seeing running, and every time he ran, he'd get a pain in his it seemed like his posterior hip capsule or a pain in his adductor. And it was pretty significant. It was like every single time, it'd be about maybe 5 minutes into the run, he'd start feeling it. And his hips didn't fucking rotate. So it's like, well, I don't know, you're making your hips just do a bunch of rotational stuff without, even though, you're running and it seems linear, there's still rotation happening in your hip.
Yeah.
So, give him rotation back, and the guy's now running without pain, which is, I think is.
The dangerous thing is you'll get rotation someplace else. It'll be in your knee or ankle or low back. And eventually we all know how that ends.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always see a lot of low back stuff coupled with some hip stuff. Always.
It's hand in hand. Like, that's usually my issue, is that my right hip is dog shit and my low back suffers for it. So, but I've been working on it slowly, and I'll be honest, like not squatting, above 75%. Well, actually, I haven't really squatted since May.
Oh yeah, is that why you're just doing torso and up? You're not doing the full thing. Don't want to see those legs.
I'll always work lower half, but no, break. Like I remember back in May or April, I put a barbell on my back and just said, "You're done. You do one squat."
Legs there underneath, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right, man. Hey, it's all good.
Yeah. Well, buddy, like we could probably keep doing this for another hour or two, but let's cut it there, and we'll do another one again just because this is a pretty good time. I enjoy talking about this stuff.
Sure,
but hang around for a sec, and I'll close this off. Yeah,
next time I'll have to put some fucking maxi pads on my armpit.
Man. Like, dear God.
Maxi pads in there or something like that. Holy tampons don't work, I know that.
All right, guys. Shymko, where can everyone find you now? You got a website or Instagram or anything like that?
I don't have, to be honest, man. I'm not really much on the online stuff right now, the social media, as much as I should be. I'm going to be getting into that a little bit more in January, February. For some legal reasons, I've just finished up with some work. But if you do want to reach me, I do have I think they call it a handle. I don't know what they call it on Instagram, but you can see me on Instagram, Shymko PT.
How do you spell that?
You can always give me an email if you need a little help with anything too, or you can just go through Barrett. My email is bryanshymko@gmail.com, BRYANSHYMKO @gmail.com, and you can always give me you can always reach out there, no problem. But I just opened my business up there, and I guess it was second half of November, so I've only been about a month and a bit, kind of on my own. So I got Shymko Personal Training. I'm rolling, man. Here we go. I'm rolling.
Big dealing, man. Let's do this.
Here we go. I'm working for myself now, guys. I'm working for myself. So.
All right. Shymko, thanks again, buddy. We'll have you on again for sure. This has been a blast, man.
Awesome, man. Barrett, it's always great to talk to you, buddy. Anytime, man, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, hang on for a second.
Buddy, have a great holiday, and I guess it's the first one with the new kid.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Cool.
Exciting stuff.
Crazy.
All right. Are you just going to cut me now? Are you going to just stop recording, or are you just ending me altogether?
I'll just stop recording. Hang out for a sec.
All right.
All right, guys. There it was.
See you guys.
The sweatiest troll we have. Talk to you later, buddy.